Hello and welcome to our Comcast Client Solutions project. Our team consisted of Mark Gaskins, John Dorsey, and Lauren Harvey. For this project, our team took a look at what Comcast was really hoping to achieve. And from what we gathered, you wanted to identify the next country or countries for your next outsourced call center, and by partnering with George Washington, you are hoping that we can provide new insight that you might have overlooked or thought of in a different perspective. And in your current market, you have recognized a few challenges which you have faced along the way, which were mentioned during the interview and Q&A sessions, and these included such items as indicated here. You identified challenges in the current talent pool and in finding the right countries and call centers, providing a labor force for the right costs with the right labor quality, who can handle capacity, recruiting, training, and retaining to make the venture worthwhile. You mentioned that some vendors in countries like Colombia, which have had to be closed because the labor pool is too difficult to continuously source. You wanted the ability to provide volume of employees between 300 and 500, as well as an average cost of labor per employee, which is cost effective. You mentioned dealing with geopolitical risks in countries in which you currently have vendor partnerships with, as well as weather risks such as Philippines, which is prone to devastating typhoons which can cause your call centers to go offline. And lastly, you have faced challenges in cultures, accents, and empathy as well. In our methodology, we elected to utilize variables provided by Comcast to guide our filtering process. We chose to obtain existing data sets that have been cultivated by highly respected global organizations to use as inputs for our analysis. A relational database platform was then created within Microsoft Access to organize the compiled data and to perform phases 1 through 3 of the analysis. In this first phase of our country analysis, the scores for each country for the 9 factors below were compiled into the relational database. The 9 scores were then totaled and the average score for that country was calculated. This score became each country's phase 1 score. The data sets used in this phase were from the 2017 Worldwide Governance Indicators compiled by the World Bank, which evaluates 213 countries across 6 different factors of governance. This data is collected from up to 30 sources per factor and includes private sector firms, international organizations, non-government organizations, think tanks, and survey institutes. The WGI provides its scores in several formats. We utilized the 2017 ranking for each country, which ranged from 0 being lowest to 100 being highest. We also utilized the 2018 Index of Economic Freedom, which was produced by the Heritage Foundation. This index was created as a means to assess each country for its governmental impact and resulting economic environment. This index provides score on a scale of 0 to 100 for 12 variables. The IEF evaluates 186 countries and scores each on a scale of 0 to 100 across 12 variables. In the second phase of the analysis, we incorporated infrastructure risk and added in a measure of human capital. The infrastructure risk score was assigned a weight of 40% of the final score. The human capital score was assigned a weight of 20% of the final score. And lastly, the phase 1 score was assigned a weight of 40% of the final score, as noted here in this formula. The infrastructure score was pulled from the World Bank Logistics Performance Index Global Rankings, and this score was calculated using qualitative and quantitative assessments on the performance and quality of logistics and supply chain components within each country. The LPI produced a score on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being the highest possible score. We utilize the Human Capital Index score from the World Bank as a means to assess the quality and potential productivity of the labor pool within each country. The Human Capital Index scores are calculated from survival rates, the quantity and quality of education, adult survival rates, and growth rates of children under the age of 5. In the next phase of our country analysis, we incorporated the English proficiency rating, average monthly wages, the unemployment rate, the disaster effect rate, and whether that country was already a current Comcast call center location. The English proficiency score was utilized from the Education First 2018 English Proficiency Index. This score measures the English language speaking, reading, and listening abilities of people within a country. The average monthly earnings were calculated using the International Labor Organization's database. Wage data from 139 countries was available for use and were reported in the local currency and often had 10 years of wage data reported. We utilize the most recent year of data available for each country and then use currency conversion rates to determine the US dollar equivalent. With Comcast's noted ideal pay rate being less than 900 US dollars per worker per month, we use 900 US dollars as our maximum wage limit within our analysis. To assess unemployment rate of the countries, we determined that a minimum and maximum limit should be used. Research indicated that an unemployment rate of 4% to 5% was indicative of a healthy economy. However, our concern was to ensure that there would be sufficient workers available to steadily employ if a new 500-person call center was to be established in an undetermined city. With this in mind, we selected a minimum unemployment rate of 3% and a maximum unemployment rate of 7%. A significant concern when planning global expansions of operations is the potential for widespread disasters that may impact business operations. To evaluate the rate of disaster occurrences in the country analysis, we obtain Emergency Events Database, which is produced by the Université Catholique de Louvain. This data set contains a comprehensive list of natural, technological, and complex disasters occurring in the past 100 years. The number of event occurrences, category and subcategory of events, number of people affected, injured, killed, or made homeless, as well as the dollar amount of damage is recorded for each country. We chose to limit our focus to the events occurring in the last 10 years and focus our attention on the total number of people affected by the disaster. With this data, we calculated the number of persons affected by disasters within a 10-year time period. We then calculated the average number of persons affected by disasters per year, and the total population amount determined the average annual rate of persons affected by disasters. And lastly, in order to provide Comcast with new potential call center locations that would allow for global risk diversification, we chose to eliminate any countries that Comcast currently has already call center operations in from our country analysis. Although several of these countries otherwise met our criteria, they were excluded from the Phase 3 results. After completing the third phase of our country analysis, we were able to narrow down our list of potential expansion countries to 4. Each of these nations had an average monthly wage of less than 900 US dollars, an unemployment rate between 3% and 7%, had at least a moderate level of English proficiency, and demonstrated a low disaster effect rate. In order, the 4 finalists after Phase 3 were Malaysia, Panama, Argentina, and Indonesia. These 4 countries were then further researched in depth to determine which would provide the most strategic expansion opportunity for Comcast. After the 4 phases to evaluate all available countries for potential global expansion for call center support services, we elected to recommend Comcast proceed with the call center in the country of Malaysia. Beginning in Phase 1, we mainly utilized the information from the Index of Economic Freedom. Malaysia scored relatively high in this ranking with a world ranking of 22 out of 180 countries. A significant factor is Malaysia's willingness to enhance competitiveness by liberalizing some service subsectors and adopt fiscal reforms. There's no minimum wage and labor regulations are not rigid. Essentially, the government is making it easier to operate in the country and attempting to attract larger companies to enter their space. Labor freedom was ranked high along with fiscal health and government spending. In Phase 2, we looked at infrastructure, which Malaysia excels. Malaysia has an excellent infrastructure for power, water, and telecommunications. They seldom experience natural disasters, and tropical monsoon season is typically 5 months long. When it came to Malaysia's human capital score, they came in at 62%. This score is higher than the averages for upper middle income countries and countries in East Asia and the Pacific. In Phase 3, we honed in on the criteria that is essential to the operations of the call center in Malaysia. English proficiency continues to get better each year and is considered a high proficiency country. The corporate tax rate is competitive with other countries at 25%, and wages were also affordable, as well as unemployment rate was low at 3.29. To alleviate the challenges ahead, we suggest Comcast partner with some of the established call center vendors already operating in that area. The four top companies range from 250 to 10,000 employees and could eliminate some of the red tape of coming into a new market.